Mexico was left in shock in July 2011 as a disturbing video showed the gruesome dismemberment of Felix Gomez Garcia, a cartel worker, and his uncle Barnabas Garmez with a chainsaw. This incident showed the brutality of cartels, known for their extreme violence, which include a range of torture methods, from beatings and burning to other inhumane execution methods.
Recently happened is that Mexican officials arrested an individual named Santiago Mesa Lopez, is also known as the stew maker or the pozolero.
Here are some of the most shocking and brutal cartel execution methods. Decapitation. In the scorching summer of August 2008, a name that would become synonymous with terror and brutality echoed through the streets of Mexico. Moises Escamilla May, notoriously known as El Gordo May, or Fat May, was apprehended for a string of offenses, most notably the alleged beheading of 12 people in Yucatan, Mexico. This notorious drug lord is known for his ruthlessness in decapitating his victims, severing their heads from their bodies. One would wonder how one human could commit such a gruesome act against another. He was a leader of the Old School Zetas, a faction of the Los Zetas criminal cartel, and Escamilla May played a key role in the Mexican drug war. He oversaw cocaine distribution in Cancun, leveraging maritime routes from Central America to smuggle the drug into the popular beach resort. He operated a network of informants, which included corrupt members of the local police force, allowing him to maintain a tight grip on the criminal underworld. His arrest marked a significant blow to the Los Zetas cartel and highlighted the brutal nature of the drug trade in Mexico. As a way of asserting his authority, Escamilla May beheaded people, which had a terrible effect on the area he ruled over and left a path of bloodshed and terror in its wake. Unfortunately, he didn't meet the same fate as his victims. Instead, he died of COVID while serving his sentence in jail. This is just an example of how Mexico's powerful drug cartels frequently employ brutal tactics like beheadings and torture to intimidate their rivals, maintaining a cycle of violence that claims lives almost daily. This includes openly displaying severed heads as a warning, a method that the cartels have notoriously used to spread fear and maintain their control. In 2006, gunmen stormed into a nightclub and rolled 5 severed heads onto the dance floor, sending the terrified spectators into a state of hysteria. Despite increased military efforts to combat organized crime, the cartels continue to wreak havoc, showing no mercy even to law enforcement. The cartel's tremendous power and readiness to do whatever it takes to keep control of the lucrative drug trade in the area are brought to light by this blatant disrespect for authority. A good example of this brutality occurred in March 2010, when authorities discovered an abandoned police truck in northern Mexico, its windshield bearing the bloody initials of a local cartel. Inside, they found the decapitated bodies of 2 men, including the police chief of Agualeguas, striking fear into the hearts of even the most courageous law enforcement officials. Other times, the shows of violence reach new, horrific levels, demonstrating the cartel's unrelenting brutality and disregard for human life. The victims' heads are often paraded in public spaces, displayed as a twisted warning to rival gangs, the government, and the general public. In a chilling echo of Iraqi insurgents' tactics, Mexican drug traffickers have begun videotaping their killings and carrying out beheadings, using these gruesome recordings as a means of psychological warfare. In one shocking video released by a drug cartel, a man was strangled to death by twisting a cord tied to metal rods until the pressure cut through his neck, a gruesome and prolonged manner of execution. The methods employed by the cartels are as varied as they are brutal. Burned alive. The Knight Templar cartel's reign of terror is marked by a singular goal: to instill fear in all who cross their path. They achieve this through acts of unspeakable violence, setting citizens ablaze for failing to comply with their demands, even targeting moving trucks, leaving a trail of charred and smoldering wreckage. A woman who was kidnapped and subjected to unimaginable horrors by the Knight Templar cartel gave a harrowing account of how she was forced to watch as her husband was burned alive with a blowtorch, then decapitated and dismembered, his body reduced to mere pieces. The cartel's cruelty didn't stop there as they brought in 4 more victims, killing, torturing, and burning them alive, all while forcing her to witness it all. The woman's ordeal continued, as she was then sexually assaulted, her dignity and humanity utterly stripped off before they released her, believing that all she witnessed was worse than death. The Mexican cartel's treatment of perceived traitors is nothing short of draconian, their actions exceeding even the most twisted of fictional depictions. Their harsh methods are designed to strike fear into the hearts of all who dare oppose them, a chilling reminder that, in their world, loyalty is enforced through violence and terror. In some cases, to mercifully avoid prolonged suffering, some drug cartels may dismember the person before setting them on fire. This can be seen in a devastating incident that took place on September 2014, in which 43 university students disappeared in Guerrero State, southern Mexico. The Mexican government said that the students were murdered by a drug cartel, who callously burned their bodies at a trash dump, leaving behind no physical evidence. The Mexican government has consistently said that the students were murdered by a drug cartel who callously burned their bodies at a trash dump, leaving behind no physical evidence. The missing students were students of the Ayotzinapa Normal School near Tixtla, Guerrero, known for its strong political activism. In a bid to attend a protest in Mexico City, the students hijacked commercial buses. However, according to confessions from members of the Guerreros Unidos cartel, the gang, aided by corrupt local police, ambushed the students, possibly mistaking them for members of a rival cartel. 6 weeks after the tragic incident, federal investigators made a frightful discovery, uncovering bags of human remains burned to ash in the dump and in a nearby river. The remains were so charred that identification was nearly impossible, leaving families of the missing students with lingering hopes and uncertainties. The thought of any of the students having survived the initial ambush only to meet such a brutal end is unbearable. It's as if their lives were reduced to mere sacrifices, slaughtered like animals, their potential and dreams reduced to ashes. The drug war in Mexico is plagued with senselessness and evil, shattering families and communities as they look for answers that don't seem to come easily. Waterboarding. In the dark underworld of Mexico's cartel, a sinister technique known as tehuacanazo, or waterboarding, is a merciless method used in striking fear into the hearts of its victims. This method of interrogation simulates drowning, conjuring unbearable physical and psychological torment that pushes its subjects to the brink of madness. Having a dark history that spans over centuries, from the Spanish and Flemish Inquisition eras to the Japanese and German officials during World War II, this method involves pouring water over a cloth, covering the face and breathing passages of an immobilized captive, creating a terrifying sensation of suffocation and death. In the most common method of waterboarding, the captive's face is covered with a thin material, such as cloth or plastic, and secured to an inclined surface, typically at an angle of 10 to 20 degrees. This positioning exacerbates the sense of helplessness, exacerbating the physical and emotional agony. The technique is widely considered a form of torture, banned by international law and condemned by human rights organizations worldwide. Despite its notorious reputation, waterboarding has been employed by various criminal organizations to extract information and coerce confessions from helpless victims. They would pour water onto the face, targeting the breathing passages, triggering a swift and intense gag reflex. The Mexican cartel has also adopted this brutal tactic, inflicting unimaginable suffering on their victims. Theirs is more deadly. Some Mexican cartels have escalated the cruelty by not just using water, but also using carbonated water, which increases the sensation of drowning. And even worse, Sometimes they resorted to adding chili pepper or other irritants to the carbonated water down the victim's nose, inducing an excruciating burning sensation that intensifies the agony. And this brutal technique can lead to death even before the victim can confess. The sheer terror of being trapped, unable to breathe, and facing the abyss of death makes waterboarding a gruesome tool of control, leaving its victims shattered and forever scarred. Waterboarding is a notoriously brutal technique that can inflict extreme pain, physical harm, and long-lasting psychological trauma on its victims. The practice has been known to cause devastating physical consequences, including damage to the lungs, brain damage resulting from oxygen deprivation, and other severe injuries such as broken bones, which can occur when the victim struggles against their restraints. Additionally, the psychological impact of waterboarding can be crippling, leading to anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and other mental health issues that can persist for years after the ordeal. The adverse physical effects of waterboarding can last for months, while the psychological effects can haunt the victim for a lifetime. The severity and duration of these effects serve as a stark reminder of the barbarity and inhumanity of this torture technique. Pet feeding. The drug cartels are famous for flaunting their ill-gotten wealth, often by purchasing exotic wild animals like tigers, lions, and bears. These lavish acquisitions are an ostentatious display of their illicit riches, a brazen attempt to legitimize their criminal enterprise. While these pets may be visible in the cartel's opulent homes, they are not merely for display purposes or to showcase their status. Instead, the cartels have a more sinister intention for these animals, which involves using them to dispose of their victims in a gruesome and inhumane manner, feeding them to the animals. Los Chapitos, the sons of infamous Mexican cartel boss Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, have taken on the title with pride, showcasing their background and influence in the criminal underground. The lucrative business of drug trafficking has provided them with a seemingly endless supply of cash, financing their lavish lifestyles and perpetuating their grip on power. However, it is not just the drug trade that has cemented their reputation, but also murder, mayhem, and torture have been their trusted tools, employed to maintain control and crush any opposition. Those who dare to cross them, whether rival cartel members or innocent civilians, are met with brutal force, often facing a fate worse than death. Los Chapitos have been known to feed their victims, dead or alive, to their captive tigers. The Chapito brothers are the masterminds behind the world's most extensive, brutal, and productive fentanyl trafficking operation, a criminal empire built on a foundation of violence, intimidation, and fear. Due to the unbridled power and influence of their organization, the siblings and their henchmen have been able to engage in unrelenting sadism, commit crimes that are the stuff of nightmares, and instill fear in the hearts of anybody who dared to oppose them. The ranch in Navolato, Sinaloa, owned by Ivan Guzman Salazar, served as a notorious torture chamber where rival cartel members were subjected to gruesome interrogations, often meeting a fate worse than death. The Chapito brothers' torture sessions were notoriously brutal, featuring waterboarding and electric shock, done by the Sinaloa cartel's Ninis, a ruthless and feared group of sicarios, expertly trained in urban warfare, sniper proficiency, and merciless violence. These hitmen showed no mercy, relentlessly extracting information from their victims until they had served their purpose. Once the desired intel was obtained, the victims were deemed disposable, and their fate was sealed. The lucky ones met a quick end with a bullet, while the less fortunate were subjected to a fate worse than death. They were fed to the tigers kept as pets by Ivan, a gruesome and inhumane end that served as a twisted spectacle for the Chapitos' entertainment. Alfredo Guzman Salazar and his brother Ivan reportedly kept these tigers at Ivan's ranch, a place where terror and brutality reigned supreme and human life held little value. This heinous practice of feeding victims to wild animals is a horrific method commonly used by drug cartels, and Heriberto Lascano, also known as Z3 and El Lasca, was another notorious drug lord who employed this twisted tactic. As the leader of Los Zetas drug cartel, he was one of Mexico's most wanted criminals, and his penchant for violence and cruelty was legendary. Lascano's menagerie included several tigers and lions, which he kept in a state of perpetual hunger, ensuring they were always ready to devour their human prey. He derived a perverse sense of fascination from watching his victims being torn apart by these wild animals, often torturing them before sending them to their grisly death. This sadistic ritual shows Lascano's complete disregard for human life and his willingness to go to any lengths to maintain his grip on power. His actions served as a reminder of the horrors that drug cartels inflict upon innocent lives and the extreme measures they will take to maintain their control over the criminal underworld. Dismemberment. Los Zetas, a formidable force forged from the ranks of former military operatives, brought a new level of terror to Mexico's drug wars. Dismemberment. This method was pioneered by them to intimidate rivals and mark their territory. In 2015, Texas law enforcement apprehended Marcino Chano Manam Vasquez, an alleged Los Zetas hitman implicated in the 2013 kidnapping of a former drug lord's associates. The associate, who testified against Vasquez, recounted a chilling encounter with the cartel assassin. Vasquez allegedly took him to a secret location where he was holding his own family, a couple and their daughter, captive. As the associate's blindfold was removed, he witnessed a horrific scene that would haunt him forever. He saw the family standing near a flaming barrel. The associate's testimony exposed the Los Zetas' merciless modus operandi, where violence and terror are wielded to maintain control and intimidate enemies. According to the associate's harrowing testimony, Vasquez and other Los Zetas members subjected the family to an unspeakable horror, forcing the parents to witness their daughter's gruesome dismemberment with an axe. There were multiple instances of this violence, as numerous cartel members, including Vasquez, employed a twisted method of execution, utilizing morphine, adrenaline, or heroin to ensure their victims remained awake and alert throughout the ordeal. Given the damage to their central nervous system, the victims were unable to escape the excruciating pain as their limbs were systematically chopped off with heavy sharp blades or knives, deliberately avoiding vital organs to prolong their suffering. This heinous torture cocktail, combining blood infection, loss, and shock from extreme pain, was designed to break the victim's spirits and prepare them for a slow and agonizing death. These unfortunate individuals are subjected to unimaginable suffering, with no escape from the relentless torture. As they succumb to the agony, they ultimately surrender any information they possess, their minds and bodies shattered by the intense pain. This sadistic method is deliberately designed to be slow and torturous, inflicting unbearable agony that ravages both body and soul. The victims are forced to endure a living nightmare, their minds reeling, their emotions scarred. As the torture continues, they become trapped in a desperate plea for mercy, their only solace being the sweet release of death. Their once strong will is reduced to a faint whisper, begging for the agony to cease, their dignity and humanity stripped away by the merciless hands of their tormentors. In the end, death becomes their sole refuge, a welcome respite from the unending pain and suffering. In July 2023, a violent drug cartel was suspected of leaving a severed human leg hanging from a pedestrian bridge in Toluca, just west of Mexico City. The trunk of the body was left on the street below, near the city's center, along with handwritten messages signed by the Familia Michoacana cartel, taunting authorities and spreading dread into the hearts of citizens. Other parts of the bodies were found later in other neighborhoods, also with handwritten drug cartel signs nearby, a grim testament to the cartel's disregard for human life and their sinister grip on the region. Some cartels in Mexico, in their ruthless quest for dominance, resort to brutal violence to establish control over new territories. They mercilessly eliminate rivals, petty thieves, and drug dealers, leaving behind chilling messages to intimidate local residents. These messages serve as a warning, stating that such criminal activities will not be tolerated under the new cartel's reign. The victims, accused of various crimes, are subjected to unspeakable brutality, including disfigurement, dismemberment, and even being buried alive. The fact that these atrocities occurred in Puebla, a relatively affluent and large city, is particularly alarming, as it has largely been spared from the drug cartel violence that has ravaged the surrounding area. The discovery of dozens of bodies, cut into parts and frozen in freezers in Veracruz in August 2023, further highlights the cartel's brutality. The alleged members of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, one of Mexico's most ruthless cartels, were detained in connection with these heinous crimes. Psychological warfare. Torture, in the twisted world of the cartels, is not solely about extracting information, but also about breaking the human spirit. It's a cruel game of psychological manipulation, where victims are subjected to unbearable conditions, forced to endure unimaginable suffering, and coerced into surrendering their dignity. The cartel's tactics are designed to instill fear, uncertainty, and hopelessness, making victims desperate to escape their nightmare. By isolating them in cramped, dark spaces with scarce food and water, the cartels exploit their vulnerabilities, eroding their mental and physical resilience. The victims are degraded, humiliated, and subjected to unspeakable cruelty, all while being tempted with false promises of mercy if they comply. The cartel's mercy is a cruel joke, offering a swift death or a prolonged, agonizing demise, depending on the victim's level of cooperation. This psychological torture is a deliberate attempt to shatter the victim's psyche, leaving them a shell of their former self, devoid of hope and humanity. The cartel's psychological warfare is a masterclass in manipulation, exploiting fear to break their victims' spirits. The constant uncertainty and anticipation of what's to come next creates a sense of dread that permeates every moment. This mental anguish is the precursor to the physical torture, which begins with subtle gestures, like slicing or small cuts, gradually escalating to more heinous acts. The victim's emotional capacity is shattered as they're subjected to unimaginable cruelty, leaving them pleading for mercy. The torture is meticulously designed to maximize suffering, with each gruesome act building upon the last. Fingers and toes are severed, bones are broken, and skin is flayed, leaving the victim's body mutilated beyond recognition. The pain is so excruciating that death becomes the only desirable escape, a welcome respite from the unending agony. The cartel's torture is a slow and deliberate descent into hell, where the victim's mind and body are shattered, leaving nothing but a hollow shell of their former self. These atrocities are so heinous that it is evident how little the cartels value human life, how unrelenting their reign of terror is, and how cruel they are. Public hanging. The gruesome spectacle of bodies hanging from bridges has become a chilling norm in Mexico, a grim testament to the cartel's unyielding grip on the country. This gruesome demonstration of authority, intended to terrify and scare, has developed into a daily horror show. The infamous Uruapan massacre, which left 19 bodies hanging from a bridge, remains etched in the nation's memory. In August 2019, 16 dismembered bodies were found scattered across 3 locations in Uruapan, including the Petróleos de México pedestrian bridge. The sheer scale of violence, the brazen disregard for human life, and the deliberate display of atrocities have become a hallmark of the cartel's reign of terror, leaving Mexico in a state of perpetual fear and dread. The gruesome discovery in Uruapan marked a chilling resurgence of the brutal tactics employed by drug cartels during Mexico's devastating 2006 to 2012 drug war. The eerie scene, with 3 bodies suspended from a bridge and a menacing banner taunting authorities, echoed the horrific massacres that once plagued the nation. The cartel's brazen message, denying a war against the people while threatening Los Viagras, a rival gang, was a reminder of their unrelenting grip on the region. The killing spree sent shockwaves throughout Mexico, reviving haunting memories of the dark era when drug cartels wreaked havoc, leaving piles of bodies on roadways as a gruesome signature of their dominance. The eerie silence that followed was a grim testament to the cartel's ability to strike fear into the hearts of citizens and authorities alike, leaving many wondering if the country was on the brink of descending back into the abyss of violence and terror. The grisly scene in Uruapan was a stark reminder of the genderless nature of the cartel's brutality, as 2 of the 3 bodies suspended from the overpass were women, their dignity violated in death as they hung half-naked by their necks. The dismembered body of another woman was found among the scattered remains. The frequent discovery of mutilated bodies in public spaces, often displayed in gruesome tableaux, has become a dreadful symbol of Mexico's drug war, as criminal gangs seek to intimidate rivals, terrorize citizens, and demonstrate their ruthless power. This grim reality has left a nation in a state of perpetual fear, as the cartel's brutality knows no bounds, targeting men and women alike with equal ferocity. The sheer brutality of these crimes has numbed the senses, leaving many to wonder if the cycle of violence will ever be broken. El guiso, the stew. The mention of stew typically evokes warm, comforting memories of a hearty meal, but in the sinister world of Mexican cartels, the term takes on a grotesque and macabre meaning. El guiso is a notorious example of the cartel's brutal methods of disposing of victims, and Santiago Meza Lopez, also known as El Pozolero, or the stew maker, is the mastermind behind this gruesome practice. El Pozolero is a traditional Mexican stew made with hominy, spices, vegetables, and meat. Arrested in 2009, Meza Lopez earned his chilling nickname for his role in dissolving human bodies in acid, effectively cooking them into a stew of human remains. Santiago Meza Lopez, a ruthless operative for the Tijuana cartel, spent years perfecting his craft, disposing of countless bodies with calculating efficiency. Until his arrest in 2009, he was the cartel's go-to stew maker, responsible for dissolving human remains in a concoction of water, caustic soda, and acid. His method was both brutal and effective, leaving only teeth and bones intact after a mere 8 hours. Meza Lopez's chilling confession revealed the scope of his atrocities, admitting to disposing of hundreds of bodies in this manner, all for a weekly payment of $600. He described the process of disposing of human remains. After dissolving the bodies in acid, he would burn the remaining teeth, nails, and bone fragments, reducing them to ashes. He then buried these remnants in an empty lot on his property, leaving no trace of the victim's existence. Meza Lopez's Ensenada Ranch, situated just 70 miles south of the border, became a sinister laboratory for his twisted craft, where he stirred and dissolved at least 300 bodies in acid. The sheer scale of his crimes is staggering. His actions have left a lasting impact on the families of the victims, who will never know the fate of their loved ones. The victims of these gruesome tales span a wide range, including public servants, law enforcement officers, and ordinary citizens who refuse to succumb to the cartel's demands. Informants and witnesses who dared to speak out against the cartel's atrocities were also silenced through brutal means. Even drug dealers and rival cartel members were not spared from the carnage, as the cycle of violence and retaliation created a never-ending spiral of bloodshed. But beyond the targeted killings, countless innocent Mexicans have been caught in the crossfire, suffering grievous injuries and death. The streets of towns and cities across the nation have become battlegrounds, where the sounds of gunfire and screams have become all too familiar. The stench of death and fear hangs heavy in the air as the cartel's reign of terror continues. Children have been orphaned, families have been torn apart, and communities have been left to pick up the pieces of shattered lives. The psychological trauma inflicted on those who have witnessed such atrocities is immeasurable, leaving deep scars that may never fully heal. The sheer scale of the violence and the depths of depravity have left a nation reeling as Mexico struggles to come to terms with the darkness that has consumed it. The world watches in horror, wondering how such atrocities can be committed with impunity and when the bloodshed will finally cease. Thanks for watching. See you in our next videos.